Coming up with the perfect wrestling gimmick is challenging. Most people don't get it right on the first try. Just ask Flex Cavana, Chili McFrost, and Rambling Ricky Rhodes. But those guys just had cheesy names. The rest was just about ready for prime time. But some people, they were just way off. I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling, and let's take a look at 7 of the worst early gimmicks of all time. Now, before we get into this, we appreciate your support, so if you enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and figure 4 leg lock that notification bell. Number 1. The jig is up. See, even Becky Lynch, arguably the biggest female talent in professional wrestling history, the first woman to ever win a WrestleMania main event, didn't get it right on the first try. You know her now as the Man, the no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is badass who has dominated the women's scene for the better part of the last 5 years. But the road to this show-stealing personality didn't happen overnight. For years, Becky hovered around the mid-card with her lass-kicking, steampunk enthusiast, Charlotte Flair's best frenemy gimmick. And it wasn't bad, it just wasn't going to propel her to the top of the card. And we will say this, it was much better than what she started with. On the June 26, 2014 episode of NXT, the future female face of the company would make her debut in a match against Summer Rae. She'd make her presence known in a manner that would highlight her Irish heritage with green everywhere. Just green on top of green for this newcomer. No big deal, lots of big stars have worn green. But from there, oh gosh, oh come on, oh goodness no, Becky, come on. That's right. Big Time Beck's first gimmick was basically what you'd get if you typed Irish wrestler into a free AI system. The announcers would try to make it work, saying that Becky was trained to dance by Colin Farrell's brother, you know, as if being taught to dance by this guy's brother somehow made it cool. She'd even get lured into a dance-off with Fandango's former bestie, only to be met with a clothesline for her troubles. Yikes. But yeah, fortunately this was very short-lived, because acting like something that popped out of Hornswoggle's wet dreams wasn't going to make it to the main roster. Number 2. There's no place like home. In hindsight, Kevin Nash should have been a can't-miss prospect. He was 7 foot tall, he was in amazing shape, and he was downright hilarious. Surely, there's no way WCW could screw up this sure thing. Well, okay, they might have a history of screwing up sure things. Anyhow, after getting off to a brief start as one half of the Road Warrior ripoff tag team, the Master Blasters, Nash was put into the role of Oz. Oz, an Australian wrestler, you ask? No. We're talking about the great and powerful Oz from the MGM classic, The Wizard of Oz. You see, at the time, WCW was owned by Ted Turner, who owned TBS, TNT, and Turner Classic Movies. And as the owner of Turner Classic Movies, Turner had paid quite a lot of money for MGM's film catalog and was encouraging WCW to make the most of the company's intellectual property. And yes, if you've ever heard that rumor that they wanted to cut Ric Flair's hair, give him an earring, and call him Spartacus, this is exactly the reason why. So, while the Nature Boy managed to escape that weird fate, Kevin Nash did not, and we got a character based on Oz. Never mind for a moment that Oz is a place, not a guy. There is no character named Oz. This train wreck started at Super Brawl 1, where in the main event, Spartacus defeated Tatsumi Fujinami. On the undercard, a familiar quartet was being led to Oz by a character known as the Great Wizard. This Oz would turn out to be a future world champion wearing a weird rubber mask, and Nash would make quick work of his opponent, defeating Tim Parker in 26 seconds, but yeah, this horrible gimmick was dead like a house had been dropped on it. From there, Nash would move on to the slightly better Vinny Vegas character, which was basically Nash doing his impersonation of Steve Martin from the movie My Blue Heaven, and eventually he'd make his way to the WWE, where they realized that sometimes it's best to let a 7-foot butt kicker look like a 7-foot butt kicker. The Diesel gimmick would propel Nash to the top of the card, where he'd headline WrestleMania and go on to found one of wrestling's most successful factions with the NWO. So, Oz was a horrible idea, but at least it produced maybe the best 8x10 of all time. What a world. Number 3, Hunter Hurst Horror. We already know what you're thinking, yes. Before Triple H was the sledgehammer-wielding, motorhead-blaring, crotch-chopping leader of D-Generation X, he was a Connecticut blue blood. And yeah, that's a little silly, but it's totally believable that a polo-playing, tea-drinking New England Nancy boy would want to become a professional wrestler. No. What we're referring to is the gimmick that the current most powerful man in professional wrestling used before coming to the WWE. We're talking about the punerific moniker of Terra Rising. Yeah, that's bad. That's really bad. And before you think this is another entry where we bash classic WCW, know that this was 100% not their fault. The story goes that Triple H's teacher, Killer Kowalski, wanted Hunter to be known as the Terrorizer. And when Hunter wanted to pump the brakes a bit and requested a name that was, a first name and a last name, Kowalski was like, screw it, you're Terra Rising. And it didn't get a lot better from there, as with his long bleach blonde hair and his snazzy ring attire, he looked like a younger bootleg version of Ric Flair. After a year terrorizing the independent scene, Terra Rising would make his way to WCW. And what's amazing about this gimmick is apparently nobody tipped off the folks in the production truck that his name was a terrible pun, because when he made his debut on WCW Saturday Night, this is what happened. Oh boy. Well, it didn't take long for WCW to realize that the name was a joke, and he was promptly turned into a French aristocrat by the name of Jean-Paul Levesque. Which is funny in its own way, because Hunter was able to ditch the terrible name in exchange for a terrible French accent. Number 4. You know the drill. Alright, who's the patron saint of terrible gimmicks? That's gotta be Kane! Before striking gold as The Undertaker's creepy half-brother, Kane saw more than his fair share of half-baked concepts. His first big break was in Jerry Lawler's USWA, where he dressed like an angry holiday tree as the Christmas creature. From there, he'd use names like Bruiser Mastino, Sid Powers, Doomsday, and even Spartacus. Hey, full circle. But it wasn't until he joined the WWE where he would be saddled with one of the worst gimmicks of all time, Isaac Yankem, DDS. You see, Jerry Lawler had just lost a Kiss My Foot match to Bret Hart, and having to kiss his own feet made Jerry have horrible breath. So he went to his dentist, Isaac Yankem. I yank him. Am I saying it right? I'm worried the clever nuance is being lost. Oh, and look at his horrible teeth. What kind of dentist would have nasty chompers? Hilarious. Ever get the feeling that Vince just made gimmicks out of things that he hated? He got a root canal, so we got Isaac Yankem DDS. Or he got an audit, so Erwin R. Shyster, otherwise known as IRS. Or he parked in a towaway zone, so we were introduced to the Repo Man. Anyways, the evil wrestling dentist was the height of 1995 WWE, where your job was basically your wrestling gimmick. You're a wrestling trash man. You're a wrestling race car driver. You're a wrestling teacher. Fortunately, it didn't last long. Unfortunately, Kane would go from one crap gimmick to another as he was tapped to play the fake Diesel. Hey, Diesel! Full circle. He'd get to mock Kevin Nash for a bit before finally landing the gig of a lifetime as one half of the Brothers of Destruction, Kane. Number 5. Blissfully Out of Touch. What a wonderful concept WWE's Performance Center is. It gives the stars of tomorrow the chance to learn from the best and to make mistakes on a much smaller stage. And a big part of those early stages is figuring out who you are. For example, Big E wanted to be a wrestling mailman named Mailman. See? Isn't it better to learn that's a terrible idea in a lonely warehouse in Florida instead of live on Monday Night Raw? Well, alright, maybe it's not the worst idea. He could have been like, special delivery! But I digress. It was in sessions like these that Alexa Bliss and Scott Dawson, better known as Dax Harwood of FTR, flexed their acting muscles by playing a romantic pair with southern accents and dreams of big money and a teacup pig. Probably not a $1 million gimmick, but it got them out of their comfort zone. When Bliss was ready for her on-screen debut, her character was that of some kind of glitter fairy cheerleader? You know, it was like if Johnny B. Bad's Bad Blaster was fused with Sunny Body Donna and the Spirit Squad. It was a choice, not a particularly good one, which is why pencils have erasers, you know? Bliss would turn heel and team up with Buddy Murphy and Wesley Blake, and the results were amazing. In fact, the act was so hot that it's kind of a head-scratcher that they weren't brought to the main roster as a unit. Bliss would get drafted to SmackDown in 2016 and quickly win her first women's world title, while Murphy would have a brief, interesting run with Seth Rollins, Rey Mysterio, and Malachi Black. And Blake, he never did much of anything outside of the Forgotten Sons stable. But Bliss got her happy ending, becoming wildly successful, and finally getting her pig. Number 6. The House of Light. When you think of the New Day, what do you think of? Pancakes, bootios, video games, extremely elaborate cosplay, the most inexplicable split that has ever been performed? Well, before this trio went on to become one of the most popular and successful tag teams of all time, they were a floundering trio of singles wrestlers. Okay, maybe that isn't fair to say that Kofi was floundering. He had been a multi-time Intercontinental and U.S. champion, but after a failed run on top with Randy Orton, it was clear that he had reached his ceiling within the organization. But Xavier Woods and Big E, formerly Langston, weren't going anywhere. Xavier Woods was doomed to be another random dancing act, and Big E was a generic power wrestler who didn't deliver any mail at all. So when the trio decided to become a unit, they were originally pitched as somewhat of a new era nation of domination. But then Vince McMahon quickly did a 180, and that changed to, let me check my notes, dancing preachers. On the Feel the Power podcast, Xavier Woods would say, "So we're just sitting there smiling and nodding at Vince, but we can all hear each other in our heads like, 'No, this is never going to work. What are you doing, preachers? No!' We're just smiling and nodding like, 'Yep, we'll take the opportunity, Vince,' like the biggest contrast in what was happening. And the names that the WWE creative came up with for this trio were, we're going to make fun of them, but they're amazing. You've got the House of Positive Energy, or Hope, the Beacon, the House of Light, the Wonders. Oh man, that's really going to piss off Tom Hanks. Healing Through Harmony, and best of all, the Nation of Salvation. You got some competition there, Chili McFreeze. And they were right. The gimmick was dead in the water. But after a heel turn, the trio was able to mold the concept into what eventually made them one of the most popular and decorated factions of all time. Number 7, model employee. LA Knight, was doing a pretty solid job in NXT. His bold and brash style caught on with the fans, and he was having some pretty good matches with names like Cameron Grimes, Grayson Waller, and Gunther. But most of all, his Attitude Era-esque delivery made him a real standout in today's era of more conversational promos. And if wrestling has taught me one thing, it's that wrestling fans love chanting. We got 2 words for you. What does everybody want? And that's the bottom line, because, see, you couldn't resist. So LA Knight was tailor-made for the main roster of WWE, and then Maximum Male Models happened. Don't get us wrong, Maximum Male Models isn't a bad gimmick. Mace and Mansoor were hilarious, but LA Knight seemed to have some upper card potential, and instead he was thrown into this comedy gimmick as Max Dupree. Gone was the yeah, and in was titillating the juices of your guilty pleasures. Yeah. Fortunately, he was somehow able to escape this red bespectacled fate and was able to do what got him to the dance. Pointing and shouting. Well, there's our list. Did we forget any early terrible gimmicks or so? Leave them in the comments section below. Also, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and back elbow that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Senior Siete for Savin Wrestling saying, bye-bye.